with what looked like giant liver spots. He sat on the damp concrete like a bulked-up vulture and stared at her, not barking, not moving. He looked like her great-uncle Fred had before he died when she was 6. She'd liked her Uncle Fred. And then one day, his heart had gone, as her mother had put it, and that had been it. "Hello," she said, and the dog lifted his head a little. So she stooped down and reached through the cage doors to scratch him behind the ears. He looked at her, and then closed his eyes in appreciation for the scratch. "What's wrong with him?" Nina asked the attendant. "Nothing," the attendant said. "He's part basset, part beagle." She checked the card on his cage. "Or he might be psychic. This is his last day." Nina's eyes opened wide. "You mean—" "Yep." The attendant sliced her hand across her throat. Nina looked back at the dog. The dog looked back at Nina, death in his eyes. "Oh, God!" She stood and shoved her hair behind her ears, trying to look efficient and practical in an effort to be efficient and practical. She did not need this dog. She needed a happy, perky puppy, and on his best day this dog would look like a professional mourner. And he wasn't even a puppy. Any dog but this one. She looked down at the dog one last time, and her hair fell forward, a curly black frame for his depression. He bowed his head a little, as if it had grown too heavy for him, and his ears sagged with the bow. She could not take this dog. He was too depressed. He was too big. He was too old. She took a step back, and he sighed and lay down, not expecting anything at all, resigned to the cold, hard floor and no one to love him and the certainty of death in the morning. At least, that was what Nina was sure he was resigned to. She couldn't stand it. She turned to the attendant and said, "I'll take him." The attendant raised an eyebrow. "That's your idea of perky?" Nina gestured to the puppies. "They'll all be adopted, right?" "Sure." Nina took one long last glance at the tumbling, chubby puppies. Prozac with 4 legs and a tail. Then she looked at the other dog. Depressed, alone, too old to be cute anymore if he ever had been. "I have a lot in common with this dog," she told the attendant. "And besides, I'd never sleep again knowing I could have saved him and didn't." The attendant shook her head. "You can't save them all." "Well, I can save this one." Nina crouched to the dog's level. "It's okay, Fred. I just rescued your butt." The dog rolled his eyes up to stare at her. "No, don't thank me. Glad to do it for you." Nina stood up and followed the attendant down the hall. At the end, she turned, and Fred moved forward, pressing his nose through the bars. "Hey, it's okay," Nina called to him. "I'm coming right back as soon as I get you sprung from this joint." Fred moaned and stumbled back into the depths of the cage. "Oh, yeah, you're going to cheer me up," Nina said, and went to sign the papers and pay the fee. He didn't get much happier when the attendant opened the cage and he waddled out into Nina's arms, fragrant beyond belief. "You stink, Fred," she told him. And then she picked him up and held him to her, telling herself that her silk suit was dry cleanable and that at least it was brown, and so was most of Fred, so the dog hair wouldn't show. He looked up at her, and she added, "And you weigh a ton." He was like dead weight in her arms, round and bulky, and most of his weight seemed to be centered in his rear end, which gave him a definite droop as she balanced his hip on hers. Still, as much as he reeked, it felt good to have her arms wrapped around him. "I saved you, Fred," she whispered into his ear, and he twitched as her breath tickled him.